My parents kicked me out for not being like my brother. Now they're begging to be part of my life again, and I said no. Ever since I can remember, I was the disappointment, while my brother Ryan was the blueprint of success. The Matthews family photo albums tell a story that's painfully clear. Ryan, standing tall with trophies and medals, my parents beaming beside him, and me, Maya, often slightly out of frame or caught mid-blink. Not that I noticed this pattern as a child. Children have a remarkable ability to think their experiences are normal until someone or something shows them otherwise. My first memory of understanding I was different came on my 9th birthday. Mom and Dad had forgotten again. They were busy preparing for Ryan's robotics competition the following weekend. When I quietly mentioned it was my birthday during dinner, Dad glanced at the calendar hanging in our kitchen and winced. "Maya, honey, I'm sorry. It's just been so hectic with Ryan's competition coming up." Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We'll celebrate this weekend, okay? After Ryan wins his competition." Ryan, 14 at the time, looked up from his plate with genuine embarrassment. "Mom, I haven't won yet, but you will," she said with absolute certainty, then turned to me. "Maybe you can learn something from watching your brother, Maya. He's going places." That night, Ryan snuck into my room with a cupcake he'd bought with his allowance and a small sketchbook. "Happy birthday, Squirt," he whispered. "I know you like to draw." It was the kindest thing anyone had done for me all day. As we grew up, these moments with Ryan were rare but precious, small pockets of normalcy in a household that revolved around his genius. By high school, the contrast was impossible to ignore. Ryan had perfect grades, was headed to MIT on a full scholarship, and had already developed an app that caught the attention of several venture capitalists. Meanwhile, I struggled with calculus, excelled in art and English, and harbored secret dreams of working in product design. "You have to have a backup plan, Maya," Mom insisted when I mentioned studying design in college. "Look at your brother. He's practical. Tech is the future. Your little drawings are cute, but they won't pay bills." Dad nodded in agreement. "We've already paid for your brother's private coding lessons since he was 10. We can't afford to waste money on art school." He practically spat the last 2 words. So I compromised. I attended State University, not prestigious enough for my parents' taste, but more affordable, and majored in marketing with a minor in digital design. I worked part-time to pay for the design courses my parents refused to fund. During those years, Ryan launched his tech startup straight out of MIT, a platform that promised to revolutionize how businesses handled customer feedback through AI. He called it VoxSmart, and within a year, he'd secured 2 rounds of funding, moved to a sleek office in downtown Boston, and became the golden boy of the local tech scene. "Our son is changing the world," my father would announce to anyone who would listen at neighborhood barbecues, family gatherings, even in line at the grocery store. Meanwhile, I was barely acknowledged unless it was to ask, "When are you going to find a real job, Maya?" After graduation, I bounced between entry-level marketing positions, learning everything I could about product launches, user experience, and brand development. I saw each job not as a failure, but as education, pieces of a puzzle I was slowly assembling. But my parents saw only instability. 3 jobs in 2 years. My mother lamented during a tense Sunday dinner when I was 24. Ryan's been building his company since he was 21. He has 50 employees now. I push my food around my plate. I'm learning different aspects of the industry. I'm building a diverse skill set. My father scoffed. "You're wasting time when you should be climbing a ladder." "Not everyone wants to climb the same ladder, Dad." "Clearly," he muttered. 2 months later, I decided to take a risk. I quit my job at a marketing agency to freelance, hoping to work with a variety of clients and build a portfolio strong enough to eventually land a position at a design-forward tech company. When I told my parents over dinner, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You did what?" Dad's fork clattered against his plate. "I'm freelancing now. I've already lined up 3 clients and—" "So you're unemployed?" Mom interrupted, her voice flat. "No, I'm self-employed. There's a difference." I try to keep my voice steady. "I'm actually making more money this way, and I get to choose projects that align with my skills and interests." Ryan, who was in town for a rare visit, looked up from his phone. Actually, freelancing can be a smart move in tech-adjacent fields. Maya could make valuable connections and... Stay out of this, Ryan, Dad snapped. Not everyone has your talent or drive. Your sister needs stability, not pipe dreams. The evening deteriorated from there. What began as criticism of my career choices somehow evolved into a full inventory of my failings. My average grades in high school, my lack of prestigious internships, my affordable apartment in a questionable neighborhood, even my second-hand car. We didn't raise you to be mediocre, Mom said, her voice trembling with what seemed like genuine distress. We gave you every opportunity. I laughed bitterly. Every opportunity? You paid for Ryan's coding camps, Ryan's computer upgrades, Ryan's private tutors. I worked through college to pay for my design courses. Because Ryan showed potential, Dad shouted, slamming his hand on the table. He knew what he wanted and worked for it. You've been drifting since high school, and now you're what? Drawing pictures for whoever will pay you? That's not a career, Maya. That's a hobby. My work is not a hobby, I said quietly, feeling something breaking inside me. And I do know what I want. I've always known. You just never bothered to ask. Mom shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. We can't keep doing this, Maya. Your father's blood pressure spikes every time you make another impulsive decision. We're getting older, and we need to focus on securing our future. What does that have to do with me? Dad cleared his throat. We're investing in Ryan's company. Significantly. It's growing fast, and we stand to make a substantial return that will fund our retirement. Okay, I said slowly, failing to see the connection. What your mother is trying to say, Dad continued, not meeting my eyes, is that we need to simplify our lives. Focus on what's working. And right now, that's supporting Ryan's vision. The implication hung in the air. Ryan looked uncomfortable, staring down at his plate. Are you cutting me off? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We're prioritizing, Mom said gently, as if that softened the blow. Until you can demonstrate some stability, some direction. I stood up so abruptly my chair toppled backward. I'm 24 years old. I pay my own bills. I haven't asked you for money since college. It's not about money, Dad said, his voice hardening. It's about being part of this family's future. Right now, you're just not aligned with where we're headed. The words hit me like physical blows. Not aligned. Not part of the family's future. I see, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded when inside I was shattering. Well then, I won't waste any more of your time. I walked out of their house that night with nothing but my purse, my laptop, and what remained of my dignity. As I started my car, I caught a glimpse of Ryan rushing out the front door, calling my name. I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The rearview mirror showed him standing in the driveway, shoulders slumped, as our parents appeared in the doorway behind him. That was the last image I had of my family. Ryan, caught between us as always, and my parents, silhouetted in the doorway of a house that was no longer home. I drove away, tears blurring my vision, but my mind strangely clear. They had finally said out loud what I'd always suspected. I wasn't the child they wanted. But maybe, just maybe, that freedom was exactly what I needed. They didn't realize the girl they cast aside had been quietly learning how to play the game better than any of them. The first 6 months after being disowned were brutal. I moved into a tiny studio apartment in a part of town my parents would never visit. The kind of place where the hot water worked only when it wanted to, and the neighbors' arguments provided free nightly entertainment. But it was mine, paid for with the freelance gigs I scrambled to secure. Every morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. to work on client projects before switching to self-education. While my parents thought I was wasting time job hopping, I'd actually been meticulously studying every facet of successful tech products, from UX design to market positioning to analytics. I devoured online courses, industry reports, and case studies with a hunger that surprised even me. You're obsessed, remarked my former college roommate Jen over cheap wine one evening. It's like you're preparing for something big. I smiled thinly. I'm just trying to survive. But survival wasn't enough. I wanted to thrive, to prove, if only to myself, that my parents' assessment of my worth was catastrophically wrong. By month 8 of my exile, I had established a modest but growing freelance business. I specialized in helping tech startups refine their user experience and marketing strategies. I lived on ramen and coffee, pouring any extra money into a savings account labeled simply Future. It was during this time that I met Leo Darian at a local tech meetup I'd forced myself to attend for networking purposes. He stood alone in the corner, nursing a beer and looking as uncomfortable as I felt. Not a fan of small talk either? I asked, sliding into the space beside him. He grimaced. Is it that obvious? Only to a fellow sufferer. We introduced ourselves, and I learned he was the founder of a fledgling startup called Response Direct, a customer feedback platform that promised more actionable insights than existing solutions. My ears perked up immediately. So you're competing with VoxSmart? I said before I could stop myself. Leo's eyebrows shot up. You know VoxSmart? I hesitated, then decided on a half-truth. I follow the industry. VoxSmart is making waves. Waves backed by millions in venture capital, Leo muttered. Meanwhile, I'm operating out of my garage with 2 developers who work for equity and promises. Something clicked in my brain. Show me your product, I said. Leo looked startled, but pulled out his laptop. What he showed me was rough, unpolished, but the underlying concept was brilliant. Where VoxSmart used flashy AI that often missed nuanced customer needs, Response Direct had developed an elegant system that captured emotional context and prioritized feedback based on actual impact rather than just volume. This has massive potential, I said, my mind racing. But your interface is clunky, and your messaging doesn't highlight your actual advantages. Leo laughed without humor. Tell me something I don't know. But I can't afford to hire a design team, and marketing agencies want more than my left kidney. I took a deep breath. I might be able to help. Over the next 3 months, I worked with Leo nights and weekends, completely redesigning Response Direct's user interface and crafting a marketing strategy that positioned them not as VoxSmart's competitor, but as its antithesis, the thoughtful, efficient alternative to bloated, overhyped feedback systems. When Leo landed his first significant client, a mid-sized retail chain, he insisted on paying me. I refused the cash. I want equity instead, I said. Leo looked stunned. Maya, we're still barely staying afloat. Equity might never be worth anything. I'll take that risk. In truth, I had done my research. Response Direct's approach was not just novel, it addressed fundamental flaws in existing systems, flaws that my brother's company, for all its funding and fanfare, consistently ignored. By the end of my first year of independence, I had invested every penny of my savings into Response Direct in exchange for a 30% stake. I also took on the role of silent partner and product strategy advisor. The silent part was non-negotiable. The tech world was too small, and Ryan's shadow too long for me to publicly attach my name to a direct competitor. I don't understand why you won't let us list you as co-founder, Leo complained as we celebrated securing our 5th client, a significant uptick from the previous month. I swirled the cheap champagne in my plastic cup. Trust me, it's better this way. I have my reasons. What I couldn't tell him was that every improvement we made to Response Direct was fueled not just by business acumen but by intimate knowledge of VoxSmart's weaknesses. Weaknesses I gleaned from years of hearing Ryan boast about his company at family dinners. My brother never realized that while he was dismissing my career choices, I was memorizing his business strategies, noting his blind spots. They had cast me aside, but in the shadows, I was building something that would change everything, for them and for me. I watched Ryan's company rise, and then stall. Just like his ego, it had no substance underneath. 2 years after being kicked out of my family, I found myself in an unexpected position, thriving. Response Direct had grown from Leo's garage operation to a sleek office with 12 employees. We were still modest compared to VoxSmart's sprawling campus and hundreds of staff, but our client retention rate was nearly perfect, and word-of-mouth recommendations were bringing in new business weekly. I still maintained my anonymity, working mostly remotely and stepping in for crucial strategic decisions. Leo handled the public face of the company while I shaped its soul. It was an arrangement that suited us both. He got credit for the innovative direction, and I got to stay hidden from my family's radar. But I couldn't help monitoring VoxSmart's trajectory. I set up Google Alerts for any mention of Ryan or his company and tracked their product updates meticulously. What I began noticing gave me a strange mix of vindication and genuine concern for my brother. The first hairline cracks appeared in tech blogs, initially just minor complaints buried in otherwise glowing reviews. VoxSmart's much-touted AI sometimes missed crucial customer feedback patterns. Their dashboard, flashy as it was, often overwhelmed users with unnecessary data. Response times for their support team were slowing. Have you seen this? Leo dropped a printout of TechCrunch's latest article on my desk during one of my office visits. The headline read, VoxSmart users report recurring bugs in latest update. I scanned the article, my stomach tightening. 3 major clients considering alternatives. I read aloud. Leo leaned against my desk. We should reach out to them. I shook my head. Not yet. Let's wait. The truth was, I needed to understand what was happening inside VoxSmart first. So, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Ryan. Maya? His voice was a mixture of shock and cautious joy. It's been. I can't believe you called. Just checking in. I kept my tone neutral. How are things? Ryan hesitated. Good. Busy. The usual. But as the conversation continued, cracks appeared in his forced cheerfulness. He mentioned temporary setbacks and growing pains. He complained about investors becoming unreasonably demanding and the challenges of managing a team that had grown too quickly. Mom and Dad ask about you, he said before we hung up. I doubt that, I replied. They do, he insisted. They just, you know how they are. Stubborn. I ended the call feeling hollow. Ryan sounded exhausted, nothing like the confident wunderkind our parents had worshipped. And beneath my resentment lurked an unwelcome twinge of worry for my brother. Over the next 6 months, VoxSmart's troubles became public knowledge. Their latest funding round fell through. 2 senior executives departed for competitors. User complaints flooded social media. Meanwhile, Response Direct was gaining traction. Our streamlined approach and exceptional customer service were drawing attention. Industry analysts began mentioning us as the one to watch in the customer feedback space. I discovered just how bad things had gotten at VoxSmart during another rare call with Ryan. The board's breathing down my neck, he confessed, his voice slurred slightly. I realized he'd been drinking. They're saying I expanded too fast, that I prioritized growth over product stability. Aren't they right? I asked gently. Maybe, he admitted. But what choice did I have? Everyone expected me to be the next unicorn founder. Mom and Dad mortgaged their house to invest in the latest round when other investors got cold feet. My blood ran cold. They did what? They believe in me, Ryan said, a note of desperation in his voice. They always have. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Our parents had gambled their retirement on Ryan's failing company. The golden child was tarnishing, and in their panic to polish him back to brilliance, they'd risked everything. The next day, I asked Leo to pull up Response Direct's latest market analysis. We're projected to overtake VoxSmart in market share within 8 months, he said, barely containing his excitement. Their new client acquisition has flatlined while their customer churn rate is accelerating. I nodded, a complex emotion settling in my chest. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about business, about building something sustainable while VoxSmart had constructed a glittering facade with nothing behind it. We need to accelerate our enterprise strategy, I told Leo. VoxSmart's big clients will be looking for alternatives soon. Leo studied my face. You know something I don't? I thought about Ryan's voice, about our parents' mortgage tone, about the empire built on expectations rather than solid foundation. I know that when something looks too good to be true, I said quietly, it usually is. When Leo said we had a chance to buy them out, I didn't hesitate. This wasn't revenge. It was business. But it felt good. The call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 18 months after my conversation with Ryan about our parents' mortgage. I was reviewing our quarterly projections when Leo burst into my office, His face flushed with excitement. "Maya, you won't believe this," he said, barely containing himself. "Vox Smart's board is entertaining acquisition offers." I set down my coffee mug slowly. "From who?" "Everyone. They're desperate. The last 2 quarters have been disastrous." He slid a tablet across my desk. "Look at these numbers." The financial report was worse than I'd anticipated. Vox Smart's revenue had plummeted by 40%. Their cash reserves were dangerously low. Several key patents they claimed to have secured were under legal challenge. "What happened?" I murmured, more to myself than to Leo. The usual story. They prioritized growth over sustainability, made promises their technology couldn't keep, and burned through cash like it was infinite. Leo leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Maya, we could make an offer." My head snapped up. "For Vox Smart? That's absurd. We're still a fraction of their size." "On paper, yes. But our valuation has tripled in the last year. We've been profitable for 6 straight quarters. Our technology actually works." He began pacing. "Their board knows they're sinking. A smart acquisition deal now would save face better than a public bankruptcy later." My mind raced. Acquiring Vox Smart would be a massive leap for Response Direct. We'd gain their client base, their technology patents, the legitimate ones, and instant market dominance. But it would also mean coming face-to-face with Ryan and possibly my parents. "Let me think about it," I said. That night, I barely slept. I ran financial models until my eyes burned. I listed pros and cons. I tried to separate business logic from personal history. By morning, my decision was made. "Let's do it," I told Leo when he arrived. "But I have conditions." The first, the deal would be structured to protect Response Direct from Vox Smart's liabilities. The second, we would retain only the staff we deemed necessary. The third and non-negotiable condition, my identity would remain confidential until the deal was finalized. "You're going to have to reveal yourself eventually," Leo pointed out. "As majority shareholder, you'll need to sign the final papers." "I know," I said, "but I want everything locked in first." The negotiations were brutal and swift. Vox Smart's board, facing pressure from investors and creditors, was in no position to drive a hard bargain. Within 6 weeks, we had a deal, in principle. Response Direct would acquire Vox Smart for a fraction of its former valuation. Ryan would lose his CEO position but be offered a senior advisory role, a courtesy I insisted on despite Leo's objections. "He's still a talented developer," I explained. "Just a terrible business leader." The day before the contracts were to be signed, I received a text from Ryan. "Who are these Response Direct people? The board won't tell me anything about the deal structure." I didn't respond. Some revelations needed to happen face to face. The signing was scheduled for 10 a.m. at a neutral law office downtown. I arrived early, dressed in a simple but elegant charcoal suit. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed revenge. This wasn't about humiliating Ryan. It was about closing a circle. At 9:55, the elevator doors opened, and Ryan stepped out, flanked by 2 Vox Smart board members. He looked thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and premature lines etched around his mouth. Success had been a heavy crown to wear. He didn't notice me at first, absorbed in a hushed argument with one of the board members. When he finally glanced in my direction, confusion clouded his face before recognition dawned. "Maya," he whispered, stopping mid-stride. "What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Leo approached from behind me. "Ms. Matthews, everything's ready in the conference room." Ryan's eyes darted between us, pieces clicking into place. "You're with Response Direct? You're part of this." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not part of it, Ryan. I own it. 65% majority stake." The color drained from his face. "That's impossible. You're a freelance designer. You can't." "Can't what?" "Build something successful." I kept my voice level. "Turns out I can." The board members shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should proceed? The paperwork is waiting." In the conference room, I sat at the head of the table, the acquisition documents before me. As I signed my name on the final page, the page that transferred ownership of VoxSmart to ResponseDirect, I felt no triumph, no vindictive joy. Just a quiet certainty that I had built something lasting while Ryan had built only appearances. "It's done," said the lawyer, gathering the papers. Ryan stared at me from across the table, his expression unreadable. "Does Mom know?"
Dad.
I capped my pen. "They're about to." Then came the day my parents showed up at my office, clueless. 3 weeks after the acquisition, life had settled into a new rhythm. The merger of ResponseDirect and VoxSmart was proceeding smoothly, smoother than expected. We'd retained about 40% of VoxSmart staff, relocated to their more spacious offices, now rebranded with our logo, and begun the delicate process of merging client bases. Ryan had accepted the advisory position, though our interactions remained stilted and formal. He worked primarily with the development team, where his technical skills could shine without the burden of executive decisions. I kept my distance, giving him space to adjust to the new hierarchy. The story of ResponseDirect's meteoric rise and strategic acquisition of the once dominant VoxSmart had caught the attention of the tech world. Industry publications clamored for interviews. Investors who had once dismissed us now sought meetings, and our client list expanded weekly. I had managed to deflect most press inquiries, but eventually agreed to a profile in Innovation Quarterly, a respected tech magazine, on the condition that they focus on the company's technology and business strategy rather than personalities. The reporter, Eliza Chun, was persistent. "Readers want to know about the minds behind successful companies," she insisted during our interview. "Especially when it's someone like you, a woman who built a tech company from scratch and then outmaneuvered an established competitor." I offered carefully curated details, my background in marketing and design, my belief in user-centered products, my partnership with Leo. I made no mention of Ryan or my family connections. The article was published on a Thursday. By Friday morning, the story had been picked up by several major tech blogs, each emphasizing the mysterious co-founder angle that Eliza had woven into her piece. One particularly viral excerpt read, "Unlike many tech founders seeking constant limelight, Maya Matthews operates largely behind the scenes." The 29-year-old design and strategy virtuoso built ResponseDirect from a garage startup to an industry leader in just 4 years, then orchestrated one of the most unexpected acquisitions in recent tech history. While competitors focused on flashy AI promises, Matthews quietly delivered what customers actually needed. I was in a strategy meeting when my assistant knocked urgently at the door. "Ms. Matthews," she said, her voice unusually tense. "There are people in reception insisting on seeing you. They say they're your parents." The room went silent. Leo shot me a concerned look. "I'll handle this," I said, rising from my seat. My heart pounded as I walked the long hallway to reception. Through the glass doors, I could see them. Mom in a dress I didn't recognize, Dad looking older and somewhat diminished in a sport coat that hung loosely on his frame. They were studying the ResponseDirect logo on the wall with expressions of bewildered pride. I pushed open the door, and my mother turned first. "Maya," she breathed, her eyes widening. "It really is you." Dad stepped forward, hand extended as if meeting a business associate. "We read the article. About your company. About the acquisition." I didn't take his hand. "It's not what you expected from your mediocre daughter?" Mom flinched. "We never called you mediocre." "Not in those exact words," I acknowledged. "You preferred wasting potential and lacking direction." An uncomfortable silence settled between us. Other employees in reception were pretending not to listen while obviously straining to hear every word. "Perhaps we could speak somewhere private?" Dad suggested. Against my better judgment, I led them to my office, a corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. As they entered, their eyes cataloged everything: the awards on the wall, the sleek furniture, the framed Innovation Quarterly cover. "This is impressive," Mom said, running her fingers along my desk. "We had no idea." "That was the point," I replied, remaining standing while they took seats across from me. "Ryan didn't tell us," Dad said, a note of betrayal in his voice. "I asked him not to." I crossed my arms. So, why are you here? They exchanged glances. My mother reached into her purse and pulled out a small folder. We've been thinking, she began carefully. Now that we understand your capabilities, we wanted to discuss potential investment opportunities for the family. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. Investment opportunities? Dad nodded eagerly. We've always believed in supporting promising ventures. Family ventures. Always, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Through the glass wall of my office, I spotted Ryan stepping off the elevator, freezing when he saw our parents through the glass. He looked from them to me, his expression a mix of alarm and resignation. You told us to demonstrate stability and direction, I said, addressing my father's words from years ago. Is this stable enough for you? Is this enough direction? Mom reached across the desk, trying to take my hand. Darling, we're so proud. We want to be part of your journey now. I withdrew my hand. Now that I'm successful? Now that I've proven my worth through profit margins and acquisitions. That's not fair, Dad protested. We're your parents. We're family. I looked at them, really looked at them, and felt nothing but a hollow sadness. No, I said quietly. You stopped being family the night you told me I wasn't part of your future. They wanted access to my life. I gave them closure instead. My parents stared at me, clearly not expecting such firm resistance. In their world, success erased all past wrongs, and now that I was successful, surely I would embrace them again. Their confusion was almost childlike. Maya, Mom tried again, her voice softening to the tone she'd once used when convincing me to give up art classes for SAT prep. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. We never stopped loving you. Love isn't supposed to be conditional, I replied. You didn't just say things, you acted on them. You cut me out completely. Dad shifted uncomfortably. We were worried about your stability. We didn't understand your vision. You didn't try to understand, I corrected him. You decided Ryan's path was the only valid one. And now that my different path has led to success, suddenly you're interested again. A knock at the door interrupted us. Ryan stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Sorry, he said. I didn't realize you were all catching up. Join us, I said, gesturing to the remaining chair. This concerns you too. Ryan hesitated before entering, closing the door behind him. The four of us, together in one room for the first time in years, it felt surreal, like a dream sequence in someone else's life. Ryan knew about this, Dad asked, accusation creeping into his voice. Only after the acquisition was finalized, I answered. And he kept my confidence as requested. Mom reached for Ryan's hand. Honey, why didn't you tell us? We've been worried sick about the company, about the house. The house you mortgaged to invest in Vox Smart, I interjected. How much did you put in? They exchanged glances. $150,000, Dad finally admitted. Almost all of our retirement savings. I nodded, having already discovered this from the company financials. And now you're here hoping I'll bail you out. That's not fair, Mom protested. But her eyes betrayed her. Actually, it is fair, Ryan said quietly. We all turned to him in surprise. Maya's right, we're here because we need something, not because we've realized how wrong we were. Dad flushed red. That's not true. We're proud of Maya's accomplishments. Now that they're financially valuable, Ryan finished. We never valued her creative thinking when it didn't have a price tag. I felt a sudden rush of gratitude toward my brother. Despite everything, despite the years of being pitted against each other, he understood. I've already handled your investment, I said, pulling a folder from my desk drawer. As part of the acquisition, I personally purchased all family-held shares in Vox Smart at their original value. I slid the folder across the desk. Inside was documentation of the transaction and a cashier's check for $600. You're getting your money back in full, despite the company's failure. Consider it my gift to you and my goodbye. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Goodbye, Maya, please. We can start over. I stood up, signaling the end of our meeting. Some things can't be undone. Some words can't be unsaid. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not interested in pretending we're a family when we never really were. At least not for me. What about Ryan? Dad asked, desperation edging his voice. "He's your brother!" Ryan and I exchanged glances. "Ryan and I have our own relationship to figure out," I said. "That's between us." I walked to the door and opened it. "I wish you both well, truly. Take the money, rebuild your retirement. But don't contact me again, asking for access to my life or my company." They rose slowly, shell-shocked, as if they couldn't quite believe this wasn't following their script. Mom tried one last attempt, reaching for a hug I didn't return. "We're still your parents," she whispered. "Biology isn't a claim ticket for relationships," I replied gently. "Goodbye, Mom, Dad." I watched them walk down the hallway toward the elevator, shoulders slumped in defeat. Ryan stayed behind. "That was harder than you made it look," he said once they were gone. "Closure usually is." He studied me for a long moment. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it. For not standing up for you when I should have. You were a kid too, Ryan. We were both playing roles they assigned us." "And now?" I smiled, a genuine smile that felt strange on my face. "Now we get to choose our own roles." 6 months later, I stood at the podium at TechCon, delivering the keynote address to an audience of industry leaders. My speech wasn't about acquisition strategies or market dominance. It was about building products that solved real problems, about listening when others only pretended to hear. From the stage, I could see Leo in the front row, beaming with pride. Several rows back sat Ryan, now heading our R&D department, where his talents finally had the right structure to flourish. My parents weren't there. They didn't need to be. This moment, like my life, belonged to me, built on my terms, valuable not because of anyone else's approval, but because it was authentically mine. As the applause washed over me, I realized that the greatest revenge hadn't been buying my brother's company or rejecting my parents' sudden interest. It had been refusing to let their rejection define me. I had become successful, not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. And that made all the difference.